One of the things that I think was a theme in everyone's introduction and area of focus is this whole concept of interoperability. There's a confluence of events that is happening, and it presents us with a really unique opportunity for changing from disease state to really prediction. And Andrea, I'd love to hear a little bit about the data strategy that you're pulling together and how that's going to help further the state of, this future of health concept.
So NIH, we've been going down this experiential journey, I call it, over the last few years in our data science space, and we just issued this past year our first ever data science strategic plan. Trans NIH, trans disease, trans domain, and I would encourage you to go on our website and take a look at that. But we identified 5 key things. We really are trying to look to how we can best leverage the tremendous advances in technology with our incredible scientific expertise and research expertise and harness that in more powerful ways. And that requires some cultural change. Historically, we fund about 300,000 researchers a year at about 2,500 academic and medical centers in our country, in some cases globally. And so researchers at a time collect their data, analyze their data, test their hypothesis, store that data. We have all of this data resident anywhere you can imagine, right? Someone's desktop, someone's server, campus, medical center, data center, et cetera. And we can't find it, we can't access it easily, we certainly can't interoperate across various data domains and data sets, and we can't sustain it, we can't reuse it. So we're starting over again almost every time. And so our strategic plan really focuses on 5 key target areas. First and foremost is to work more in partnership with industry and non-traditional partners who have the expertise and advances and infrastructure and compute. We don't need to buy that a researcher at a time. We need to use that researcher's time to do the scientific advancements, not to figure out how to set up my server and my data structure and what tool I need to use, right? But the other is looking at the algorithms and the tools. We fund a great deal of that. Looking at how we can educate and train and orient our next generation scientific researchers with the tools and capabilities they need to take advantage of these new artificial intelligence, machine learning, these vast data sets. Our big data set programs now are in the 10s and 20s and 30 petabyte size ranges. These are huge data sets. We're moving all of these to the commercial cloud. We can't sustain them locally anymore. We want to bring the researcher to the data with readily available tools, with their own tools. They can do compute by themselves. They can do it with someone else. They can leave what's there for the next researcher, right? And we believe that's the model of the future. And so we are trying a lot of different approaches and techniques, including policies and other things for requiring data management plans and having people think about how they're going to share and sustain that data. But we believe that's how we'll accelerate discovery in ways we've never been able to do in the past.
That's great. Doug, I know that one of the things that you have been thinking about is working with clients to really look at archetypes. What are the archetypes in the future of health? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are some of the archetypes that you think are really, you're seeing a lot more of your clients talk about, and specifically maybe some of the challenges.
Yeah, we've coined about 10 different archetypes, and they range from, as we talked about here, sort of the data convener, the data analyzer, the data manipulator, and the interpreter as sort of one end of the spectrum, all the way through to how do we finance this in an equitable way when if you can predict the risk of a population's disease state or wellness state, what is the role of health insurance, both catastrophic and pooled insurance. And so that kind of individual financer and is a part of the future. The way we buy health insurance could be dramatically different because of the predictability of a population and the predictability of yourself. I think one of the other themes that has come out in our point of view around the future of health, and it kind of relates to the concept of getting the data to the researcher in your environment, we also talk about that we as individuals will own our own data and own access to our own data, meaning we will be in the driver's seat not only of owning that data that's either owned now by a health plan, a research organization, a health system, a life sciences corporation, but how do we create that interoperability so that we can own it and we can also grant access to that data? So another kind of archetype would be is, the idea that the individual will own the data and therefore be able to grant not only access to it, but they can use their own data to make some decisions, especially if you can layer on sort of a cognitive AI layer to get them access to the latest and greatest clinical trials, as an example. Don't wait for the hospitals to suggest it, be doing that, kind of shopping for yourself, for lack of a better way to put it. I think the only other final element that I'll talk about, that we talk about a lot, is the retailization of healthcare in general. I just got off the phone with the CEO of a big health system a few minutes ago, and his point of view is, what's the role of the emergency room in the future where, healthcare is going retail, and that the consumer is expecting the same level of retail experience, interaction that they do at, their very favorite, restaurant and retail situation and other service providers. So I think the whole element of, the retailization, and whether that becomes like a health hub kind of concept, whether it becomes a virtual concept, meaning you get care wherever you want to have care, including in your home, I think are some of the major shifts that we're predicting.
That's great. One of the things that we've been thinking about are some of the trends. And Aashima, I know when we've talked, you've highlighted some of the themes around interoperability and the connectivity to future health. I'd love to hear from you. What are the things that you're excited about? What are the things that you're seeing specifically from your role at Google Cloud?
So what we hear, much of what we are building comes from what we hear from our partners, from the industry, and how do we enable Andrea and Cardinal Health and a lot of industry stakeholders. From the mission perspective, Google is a mission-oriented company. You know us as a consumer company. Mm-hmm. And if you're hearing our keynotes, we are making our best attempt, and we are really engaging with enterprises much more deeply. For past 20 years, we have built technology from the consumer world that we are now making it available to enterprises. So truly democratization of infrastructure, democratization of artificial intelligence, and then democratization of records, which is the interoperability. So our mission statement from Google is a very timeless statement, which is to make information securely accessible and useful. In healthcare, our mission is to enable enterprises to really organize healthcare information, make it accessible and useful. And if I have to translate that, when I say organize, that means security, compliance. You need a platform to get the data that Andrea talked about. When we say accessible, that's where the interoperability comes in, right? If the data is logged up in a system, and I'll give you an example. We are all consumers of healthcare, and this is an example I use often. How many health apps? There's an app for everything, right? There's a diabetic app. How many apps do you think exist in the app stores? Any guesses? Take a guess, like 50,000, 100,000. It's not a billion. But the last I checked was like 250,000 plus, right? There's an app for everything. And now I'll ask a second question. How many of those apps do you think connect to your patient record? Like 2%, right? That's the opportunity when we as consumers are given these tools and we talk about patient empowerment, but if the glass layer of the app is not able to connect to my patient record, that's where accessibility and interoperability comes in. And then the third part is to make the information useful. That's where we are applying AI and machine learning. And we strongly believe to apply AI and machine learning in healthcare where the data is so diverse. And the standards like FHIR, HL7, we are teaching our cloud to speak language of healthcare. How many folks here are familiar with FHIR and HL7? oh, this is the healthcare cloud. Great, right? So that's what. Yeah. So we want to speak. We are teaching the cloud from the cloud perspective. Our engineering team, our product team are focused on building product solutions to talk HL7, to talk FHIR, because we believe not only that data normalization would be important, but this is the gateway to apply AI machine learning, because you don't want to build models which are working on just one set of data. That's where the standardization and semantic interoperability with FHIR becomes important. And as I shared before, we all as a consumer will benefit from it. And how many folks have I've heard of 21st Century Cares Act? Well, so according to Seema Verma, this was announced at HIMSS, by 2020, if patients want access to their data, the provider systems have responsibility to give the data in the form of an API. It's coming down. This started with President Obama, so that's where we will now, as a patient that you were talking about, have access to our own data via API, and the tools that we're building is to enable that and teaching those languages.
I think that's great. And John, I know you have talked about how Cardinal Health is using AI and ML to help your business. Would you share with the audience how you're thinking about it now and in the future, and any learnings that you've seen as you've implemented it?
Yeah, I'd say we're just at the beginning of it, so I think a lot of companies are in the same boat of how do we leverage this, and it's not as easy to consume as we would hope, right? So we have data scientists on staff. They're expensive. We need more. What we're hopeful is with Google, AutoML and developments like that, where me, and I'm definitely not a data scientist, could use it and say, hey, give me some insights out of this data pool. I've got a whole set of data, and I could almost ask questions like in a natural language query or something like that. I think it's coming, and I think it'll be faster than we think. But that's a little bit where we're struggling right now. We're getting some benefit, but I think it's nothing compared to what we'll see in 5 years.
Any immediate learnings that you've seen as you've started to implement?
I'm not familiar with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One of the things that I think is interesting with what each of you have said is really around ecosystems. So there are many traditional folks that you're working with, and you'll continue. But one of the themes that I think has come out in each of your, sort of future talks about where the health market's going is working with people that are slightly different. So Andrea, I'd love to hear, I know you all at NIH are doing some really interesting things around sickle cell and around rare diseases, and like to hear a little bit more about how these ecosystems are playing out.
Yeah, so we've tended to study by disease or by data domain or data type, and I'll share with you. So 2003 we did the Human Genome Program. That was $3 billion and took decades, more than 10 years, to be able to solve that problem. In 2003. 2010, just 7 years later, it was $10 million in months. Now it's less than $1,000 in minutes, right, to do this. So in that same window of time, we saw the rise of the electronic health record. It went from zero adoption to almost full adoption. But we haven't figured out really how to take advantage of that. And incredible changes in imaging data, so MRI and scanning data, right? So what we're seeing is incredible advances in discovery in diseases that we just could never deal with. So we have one of our programs, we have a precision medicine initiative. We believe this is a key way that we're going to accelerate discovery. We're looking for 1 million cohorts, and it's participants. We literally changed the language. You're not a patient, you're a participant in the research journey. You contribute your genome data, your electronic health record, your environmental data, so we know your Fitbit data, so we know about you in your world, in your history, how you live, and about your health, and along with 1 million other cohorts of very diverse people. Now, why does that matter? Think what you can do with preliminary clinical trial ideas if you have access to that kind of rich data across diverse over multiple years that can accelerate the $1 billion in 10 years it takes to get a healthy, a drug, a successful drug to market. There's like a 95% failure rate, right? So if you can do virtual clinical trials in these rich data sets, think how much we can learn from that. Alzheimer's, every 66 seconds someone is diagnosed in our country with Alzheimer's. I mean, just the time we've been up here, think how many people that is, right? This is a crippling economic and devastating disease for our country. And we're looking not only in how we can solve the problem, treat the disease, but also how we can use computational capabilities to predict well in advance symptoms and signs of people based on their keyboarding skills, based on their movement and action, in home, in situ, right? To help get you to the drugs and treatments sooner. We think sickle cell is on the horizon. We're going to have one of the first HIV-free generations, I believe, in my lifetime. I will see that. And so these diseases we can deal with them, right? We may not be able to resolve them all, but we can treat them. We can get treatments to the market faster. And it's this data, this merger and intersection of the ability to access data, to have more person-centric health in your health journey, and the computational capabilities that is just, it is game-changing. Today a computer is as much a scientific instrument as a microscope was 15 years ago. And so it's an exciting future.
I think I would add to that. I think we are talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning. Maybe I have a little more view from the pragmatic approach in healthcare. Even the connectivity itself is a big issue, right? AI is the next step, but I submit to you, if you don't have a solid data strategy, building an AI strategy is not going to take you far. So I'm good with examples. One more example I'll share with you. So let's say today we all talk about digital campaign, reaching out to our consumer, really helping them, empowering them to take care of their health. So today, let's say if you're running a query, maybe a population health, where you want to make an outreach to all the female who are aged from 45 to 50, who have a BRCA gene, or BRCA1 and BRCA2, had the mammogram 3 years ago, haven't checked into their physician in past 18 months. Right? There's no predictability here. You're looking backwards, and you want to find out and make an outreach to that population because they need to come and see and get their mammogram done. How many folks here in this room think you can connect all these things today and run such a query? Right? There's no AI here. One person, okay. Well, you, sir, are ahead. So, right? It's because why? Because your imaging are living in some PACS system, some in data center. Your health records are in HL7. You're paying information. What time you visited is in your membership system. How do you connect that? And that's where the cross-modality analytics requires a platform like cloud, where you're bringing in this data, you're normalizing it, and you're able to run those queries to make that outreach to your patient, to your consumers, to really help them with their journey to be healthy. And once you have the solid data strategy, the data analytics, you can really build an AI layer. What I worry now when I do talk to a lot of customers, we want AI. It's not a pixie dust, right? Yes, we want AI, but you really need a solid data. And then it's hard work. It's mundane. It's complicated. And that's where we want to help in taking in, I call ourselves glorified plumbers, to get those pipes, to get this data, normalize it. This is what Google is good at, and make it easy so that then you can build your next level of artificial intelligence tools and do the good things and innovate and build those really empowering capabilities.
I think that's great. And Doug, I'd love to hear a little bit from you around, when we think about the archetypes, what archetype do you see Deloitte playing now and in the future?
Yeah, I would say it's, in my opinion, from a Deloitte perspective, we have a unique situation where we get the opportunity to work with many, many different parts of the ecosystem that don't normally play well together. You know, if you think about retailers and healthcare, it's not natural for them to play together, but we're seeing that the retailization of healthcare is happening, and we're in a unique way because we have the opportunity to serve all the healthcare organizations and the government, plus big retailers as well. So driving that ecosystem play, that integration. Obviously, the many of those retailers are making plays themselves. Aetna and CVS coming together. I think we're going to see the kind of burgeoning, retailization of healthcare and those big retailers getting into healthcare. And by my opinion, bring it on. I think we need to innovate. I also think we're going to have this unique opportunity to work with all of the really important technology giants. Again, we're here talking about Google, but in my opinion, bring it on. The ability and the innovation that the tech giants can bring, I think, is a really, really important element to innovate healthcare way faster than we've done before. The third element that I think is kind of a forgotten a little bit element of our healthcare system, and that is the associations, the Canadian Cancer, or the American Cancer Association, you can tell I'm from Canada, the MS Society, and I think we're going to see a new lease on life in the trust factor that those organizations have had in a disease-specific way, and what role they can play around data sharing, providing insights. There's some great examples out there where for different disease states, the association is getting together with Google as an example, and creating that trust. Again, the movement towards you owning your data is happening, we talked about, but the movement towards you sharing your data into a pool to allow for greater advancement and discovery is a little bit slower on the uptake, and I think that the associations play a really key role, and we're helping kind of stitch those partnerships together.
That's great. Interestingly, as you're all talking about the future, one thing is clear: things are going to be different. And I'm curious, John, as you start to think about the team that you need to really move forward, how does it look? Does it look any different? Are there different skills that you're going to need from the workforce to help really support your organization?
Yeah, that's going to change dramatically. First, I want the pixie dust. You guys should trademark that right now, just pixie dust AI. Yeah, definitely. I think everybody, and we're seeing this just across all industries, everybody's becoming a little bit of a computer scientist, a little bit of a data scientist. It used to be there was the nerds and there was everybody else, right? And the nerds would sit and they would stitch together the computers and they'd write code, and then, but now everybody, just every profession, you have to learn at least a little bit about computers and data analytics, and so I think, we're dealing with this at Cardinal Health in IT as we shift to the cloud. Everybody's like, well, what should we learn? And it's like, well, I can't tell you exactly what, but here's some good ideas, things that won't ever go out of style. And I think that's going to apply to even professions, lawyers, doctors, medical professionals. Everybody's going to have to be a little more computer literate.
That's great. Andrea, you are the CIO of one of the coolest missions in the United States. And we're here with some of the great tech leaders. What are some of the things that you would like to see from people that are interested in working at NIH, and why come to NIH?
Yeah, partnership, first of all. We're looking for partners, not providers, not here's the answer to your problem if you just buy this. We really are in an experiential journey. That's what we do. Research is a long-term horizon, but we want to make it more agile, more facile, more adaptable, and more expedient, right? So we need people who are committed to that mission. who want to advance discovery and accelerate discovery in health for people all around the world. And so I like to say, you know, there's NIH has a big footprint, right? So whatever you do, it might seem small, but it has impacts on people's lives truly around the world in ways that you'll never, ever fully realize. There's never a time that I don't talk to groups like this that someone doesn't come up and say, you know, my mother was at the clinical center, the world's largest clinical research hospital in the world, and it was that research that saved her life. Or my son is in medical school and was funded and supported by the National Institutes of Health, right, and trained under those dollars. So everyone has, health is personal, right? It's your health, your family's health, your children's health. There's nothing more precious to us than our health and well-being. And so it is such an honor to be at NIH, and it is such an exciting time to be there. We are looking, traditionally we hired you know, they call them wet lab researchers, bioinformatics people, biologists, chemistry. What we know about the biological system and health is so small compared to what we need to know, right? After all of these years and all of this time. And so now we need data scientists, we need engineers, we need technologists, we need communicators. We need that kind of team science to really help integrate and merge some of these ideas, because that's where the discovery is going to be. It's not going to be in the traditional, you know, vertical. There'll still be discoveries there, but the ones that will be game-changing are going to come from this cross-fertilization and diversity of experience, background, and perspectives. We believe that very strongly.
Aashima, maybe one question before we open it up to the audience. We've talked a lot about data. We've talked about interoperability. Like to hear your views on security and the things that are sort of top of mind for you in that regard.
And that's a great question. And before I answer that, having come from the Kaiser world and having built those systems, I know legacy is a bad word, but I'll singularly use it. The systems that have been built in the healthcare assume the patient to be in the facility, right? If I got sick, I went and saw the doctor. Be it ER, be it my primary care physician, that paradigm has changed on its head. Right now, people are expecting care where they are, but the systems are not designed to be accessed from outside. Where you talk about ecosystem, we are talking about telehealth, we're talking about e-visits. All the systems that have been in place, they served a purpose when the people were visiting physically in that facility. And now when we're moving to care where you are paradigm, that security layer becomes very important, right? People don't know how to open the systems, right? How do you do single sign-on? What is an OAuth, right? These are basic skills. And we want to meet the industry where they are, and building a lot of security-based portfolio. It's super important to us. Google Cloud is HIPAA compliant, but we are all building new and brand capabilities, and HIPAA security is the paradigm there, like security, auditability, who has access to your system when you're talking about partners. So that becomes one part. The second part I would say is focusing on the innovation and letting the infrastructure be, I would say for Google Cloud, but that's where we want to align our core strengths and provide value to the industry. So if you are passionate about racking and stacking and designing the chips of the infrastructure, join Google, right? So, but I would want you to really work on how do you build those capabilities on this world-class infrastructure, because that's where the democratization would come from. And right, so don't solve problems is my message to you. Solve the problem that our patients need, like we need, like consumers need, and the problem that have been solved by the big tech or the infrastructure. We take security very seriously. We have hundreds of security engineers, and they're experts in their field that are available to you now, and that's where the true democratization comes in. And the third thing I would say is cloud is not just a lift and shift strategy, and I do see that even today, right? It's truly transformation. It's a means to an end. The end is not, if you've just taken a server from your on-premise and moved to the cloud, that's not what this transformation is about. It's truly looking into the business transformation, looking into, like in this care everywhere paradigm, getting that out there, and cloud be that means to the end. And you define the end, your strategy. That's where we need to get to.
I think that's great. And Andrea, I know this is really important to you. Anything to add on the security front?
No, I just think in the research world, one of the things that's really important for us is that we protect the data not just for security and privacy reasons, but to honor the consent agreement by which you consent to give your very important data to be used for research purposes, and we build those controls in to honor that consent. It may be that I only want it used for if it's federal funded and not for a profit entity, or if it's in particular areas of study. And so that's a level of complexity that we've been dealing with, and particularly as these data sets have gotten so big, and one that we continue to work on. Our studies and surveys and work has found that people are very willing to contribute their data for the bigger cause. My health, the betterment of people around the world, but they want the assurance that my privacy, what I'm consenting this data for, is going to be protected, and that there won't be any issues with it being used for purposes other than what I give it. And that's something we spend a lot of time and effort and money trying to make sure we honor that. We are absolutely committed to that because that's what is reasonable and should be what people should expect. And I think as we move more towards this participant managed, you're managing your health care, your health profile, that's going to continue to be even more important.
So I would love to hear one word that makes you kind of summarize the future of health, that describes what you're thinking as the future comes, Andrea.
Here you go. Sorry.
Optimistic.
Empowering.
I was going to say optimistic, but
And empowering.
hopeful.
I'm going to say wellness.
Wellness. So thank you. Incredible dialogue. Thank you. Great job.